Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made using the November Shimmerz Paints Color Kitz Collection. And there were so many beautiful colors and images of autumn in this collection, and it was perfect for some of my photos that I had from previous years that I was looking to get scrapbooked and into an album. So I started off with this photo. This is of both of my daughters from several years ago. You could see my younger daughter has a mask on, and we were apple picking and pumpkin picking at a farm that's about an hour away from our house, and I got lots of great autumn pictures there that I am still scrapbooking. So I started off by mounting my photo on a piece of white cardstock and then again on a piece of pattern paper from the collection. And then I drew some lines to give me an idea of where I should put the mixed media on my background. I'm going to have some strips of paper on the right, and I was thinking of having a small cluster in the upper left-hand corner too. The color that I'm using here is a Creameez called Witch's Blue that was included in the November kit. And even though I am not going to have any blue in any of the embellishments that I'm using, I thought that the blue would be a nice contrast with all of the other elements that I'm going to have on the page. So I thought this would be a good color to put in the background. In the past, the Creameez used to come in little containers, and now they come in pans. So I've been enjoying having the little pans that I find really handy to access. I have them in a little tin, and I open up the tin and I can see all the colors and make a choice very quickly as to what color I want to use. I'm also going to be using a Shimmerz, and those are still stored in the little containers because those come wet. They don't come dry. You don't have to add anything to them. Although I find that the colors are very intense, and I usually add a little bit of water to most of the Shimmerz paints. Not the sprays, but the other paints, I find a little bit goes a long way with them. So I can add a little bit of water. It helps them to move around, and I still have a nice rich color. I'm laughing because this just looks like a crazy blob of paint right now, but when I have everything layered on top, it'll make a little bit more sense. I use my heat tool and I dry the background, and then I'm going to go back in and add another layer of color, and this will make the color look a little bit more intense. I try not to add it really evenly because I like when there are darks and lights in the color. Now, oftentimes I will get comments where people will say that you've covered up your mixed media and, it's a shame because you work so hard on it and you covered up a lot of it. And I generally respond that I know exactly what you're talking about, but I kind of expect that that's going to happen, that I know that I'm going to do a lot of mixed media that in the end is going to get covered up. It's just part of mixed media. However, on this layout, I kind of wish that a little bit more of the mixed media was visible. I wish that I had maybe extended the color and made the area a little bit larger. It just seemed so large to me at this point. But then when I started putting the embellishments on top, maybe a little bit more got covered up than what I would have liked. But I am happy with the way the layout turned out in the end. So it's just all part of the creation process, I guess. Now I'm adding a lot of water to the paint because I want to add some splatters. And I mentioned this on most of my videos, so sorry if you've heard this before, but I really like to add the splatters going around the outside edge of the color because I like the way the color doesn't just abruptly stop. There are some splatters to kind of transition the dark areas into the background. And I love adding splatters so much. I usually go back in a couple of times and add a few rounds of splatters. I try to keep them close to the areas of color, but sometimes they kind of wander. And when that happens, I either use a paper towel and some water to clean them up, or if there are a lot of splatters, I will use a little bit of the same gesso that I use to prepare the paper, and I'll cover them up or at least fade them out a little that way. I'm not sure if I mentioned it. The second blue color that I used was a Shimmerz called Teal, the End of Time. And now I'm adding a little bit of a Coloringz called Ready or Not. And I thought that by adding some red on top of the blue would create some areas that looked purple. And I always love when fall layouts have some purple in them. And I really like the way that it turned out. I think that you can still see the blue, but there's also a little hint of purple in a couple of areas. It's really nice the way there's such a great variety of autumn colors already included in the kit. I am going to use one additional paint. On the right-hand side of my table, you could see one of the brand new paints from Shimmerz. It's called Twinklingz. And the name of this color is Once Upon a Wine. The Twinklingz are watercolors, and this set that we just received is all fall themed, so all the colors went along really nicely with the colors that are already in the kit. The Twinklingz are shimmery watercolors, so I thought that in addition to adding a little bit of the Once Upon a Wine to the area of color I already created, that I would use it to add a little bit of red to the splatters. I was thinking that the top of my mixed media shape looked a little bit too tapered, and I knew that I was going to have those rectangular strips of paper, so I extended the color a little bit in that spot. And now I'm using a stencil and some modeling paste, and I'm going to add these little swirls or flourishes all over my background. I purchased this stencil at a scrapbooking convention probably a little while ago, and I believe, but I'm not 100% sure, that it's made by Creative Arts, also known as Tall Mouse. And I hadn't tried it out, but I wanted some kind of a scroll. I'm not sure why I kind of associate scrolls and flourishes with autumn, but I do. And I liked the way the white modeling paste looked against the darker background. So I decided to add the modeling paste on the entire area of color. Sometimes I'll just put the modeling paste in a few areas. And it turned out to be, I think, a good thing that I did that because, like I said, really not as much of this background is going to be showing through as I thought it would. So I'm glad that the areas that show through all have the scrolls on them. So I added one round of modeling paste and then moved to another area. And then I went back to the original area because I didn't want to smear the modeling paste with the stencil. I did find it was very easy to line the stencil back up again and then move it around. And I don't think that it would have really mattered if it hadn't been lined up because, as I said, you're only going to see little pieces of it. But it just made me feel good that it was lined up and the whole background looked like it was one big unit. In a couple of places, the modeling paste got behind the stencil, but that was easy to fix. I just went back in, scraped that modeling paste off, and added some more on the top. And just in case you're wondering, I'm using some Master's Touch modeling paste. This is from Hobby Lobby, and I really think that all the modeling pastes work really well. I've also used Liquitex a lot in the past. I had bought a whole bunch of modeling paste on clearance and I stuck it somewhere and I was looking everywhere for it. And of course, now that I bought a new modeling paste, I finally found it. But I really like all the brands of modeling paste, just in case you're not sure what to buy. I really don't think you can go wrong with modeling paste. So now I'm adding a little bit of gesso to the background. There were a few areas where I had a few too many splatters, so I just kind of faded them out a little bit with the gesso. And then as a final touch to the mixed media background, I'm adding some watered down white acrylic paint, just adding a couple of white splatters. Now my background is dry and I'm going to add my strips of paper back in. I had the strip of paper on the right flipped over to the other side initially, but then when I saw the way that the orange looked with the blue, I think that that looked even better, so I decided to stick with that side. I'm going to start inking the edges of all of my elements I'm going to put on the page. I'm using some Distress ink in Vintage Photo. It's kind of my go-to color for inking elements on my pages. And I ink the edge of the photo, I ink the strips of paper, and then I ink a whole bunch of fussy cut elements. There were some fantastic pattern papers to fussy cut out in this particular month's collection. There was a whole page of leaves and pumpkins and fall related images. There was another page that had lots and lots of sunflowers, so I cut all of those out as well. And I'm going to combine those elements on this layout. I'm using my T-square just to make sure that everything is straight. I've been getting into the habit of doing that before the layout is half done lately, so that's a move in the right direction. but I had to add a little bit more ink to the strips of paper, so I had to double check whether or not they were straight again. And now I'm attaching my photo down. And as of right now, you could still see a good amount of the background. However, when I add the embellishments, they'll be a little bit less showing. So there were so many gorgeous embellishments. I love the flowers that I am going to be putting at the top of the layout. They're so beautiful, such gorgeous fall colors. And then there were a variety of leaves too. So I'm going to have 4 clusters, 3 of them surrounding my photo, and then a smaller one in the upper left-hand corner. I love the way there's a picture of a large pumpkin, so I knew right away I was going to include that on the layout, and I thought it made sense to put it in the lower right-hand corner because it's large, and so I feel like it should be toward the bottom of the layout. And then I added a bunch of leaves all around the pumpkin and then a sunflower. I'm going to be adding 1 sunflower to each of those 3 clusters that are surrounding my photo. I'm going to add to each of those clusters using the elements that I have to the left of my mat. I start off with the larger elements like the leaves and the larger flowers. And then after I have those larger elements in place, I'll add some branches, or there are also some embellishments that are berries. I add those as well. And I don't use up all of the leaves and branches, but I do use up the majority of them. It was just the right amount to create a layout. I believe that this is the last time that we went apple picking and pumpkin picking as a family. But what I think is really nice is that my daughters have gone apple picking since then. They just consider it like a fall tradition that they have to do. So they've gone with their friends and their boyfriends. And I like that. I like the way it's become a tradition for them. Although when they go apple picking on their own, they don't take the same type of photos. I remember I loved going to this farm. As I mentioned, it's in upstate New York where there are lots of farms and lots of beautiful areas where you could see all of the changing leaves. And this particular farm had a lot of really nice scenery. So I have to be content because I got a lot of great pictures through the years, but I'm always happy to get more pictures that I can scrapbook. I am adding a sunflower to each of those 3 clusters. And then I was also thinking that I should add something underneath the photo to kind of anchor it. So I'm using this Stampin' Up! Punch that I got recently, and I am using one of the pattern papers, the same one that I used to make the larger strip on the right, and I'm punching out a little strip that I'm going to place underneath the photo. And of course, before I attach it down to the page, I add a little bit of the vintage photo so that it'll match in with all of the other elements on the page. I was considering using the other side, but it had too much blue on it, and I was afraid it was going to kind of fade into the mixed media background, so I thought that the side that was that yellowish orange color would look a little bit better or be a little bit more noticeable. Well, now I'm ready to start attaching things down to the layout. Off camera, I kind of fussed around with the cluster that's to the left of the photo a little bit, and I thought I finally had it the way I wanted it, but then when I started attaching the elements down, I realized that I wanted to switch out the double sunflower element for a single one. And then I added some adhesive to the back of the larger elements, and I was afraid I would break the branches with the ATG adhesive. So because I had some adhesive on the back of the larger leaves, I just kind of tucked them into the larger leaf, and the adhesive held it down temporarily. And then later on, when I'm done with this layout and I am happy with everything, I will use some gel glue and I'll attach everything down. My problem is, if you have been following this channel for a while, you probably know I like to move things around, and sometimes the next day I will change my mind about things and move them around. So I like to have the option of being able to switch things up, so I don't like to glue things down to my layouts too quickly. But it is very important that I do glue everything down eventually, otherwise things will fall off over time, and that's another thing that I don't like. So I do make sure that I go back in and I use gel glue, and I'll glue everything down to the page once I'm 100% sure that I like where everything is. I wanted to add one of the dots to the layout, and I love this little dot that has banners on it. These dots are included in all of the Shimmerz Color Kitz collections, and I love using them. They're just the right size, and they add a nice change to the layout. It's not all paper. There's a different kind of embellishment on the page, and I love that, and I think that that's really important to make pages interesting. It's funny how sometimes I think a layout is coming together so quickly, and then I'll get caught up on the tiniest little thing. On this layout, it was the leaves next to that sunflower in the upper right-hand side of the layout. I kept switching out the leaves that I put there. Not sure why I found that so important, but I am not done yet. I'm going to switch out one of those little green leaves for a bigger leaf. And then I also wanted to add some photo corners because I love adding photo corners to my layouts. So I inked up some photo corners that I punched out of one of the pattern papers. And I'm adding those to 3 of the 4 corners. There was no point in adding one in the lower left-hand corner because it would have been covered up. And then I added another leaf to the lower right-hand corner cluster. I thought that that would fill that out a little bit. And now here I am once again fooling around with that sunflower. I couldn't decide if I should layer it behind the photo or in front of the photo, or if I should use the little green leaves or the larger brown leaf. So I ended up using 1 brown leaf and 1 green leaf, and then I layered it on top of the photo. Now I'm going to add the title. There was a title in the ephemera pack that said Sweater Weather, so I thought that was just perfect for this layout. I inked the edges, but I wanted it to stand out a little bit more, so I used the same pattern paper that I used to mat the photo with, and I fussy cut out a little mat for it, and then I once again inked the edges of that border, and then I placed that title at the top of my photo, and that completes this layout. So when you're placing an order with Shimmerz Paints, please don't forget to use my name in the comments so that you can receive your free gift. In the description box, you'll find the links to the Shimmerz shop, and you'll also find a direct link to the Color Kitz collection, so you could check that out if you're interested. I want to say thank you so much for watching this video, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch it. I really hope that you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making this layout. I hope that you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.